Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. It's December 2013 over Guam. And instead of rain, you've got mice falling from the sky.
Yeah, 2,000 mice.
2,000.
Yeah.
Gently drifting down on these tiny little parachutes. I mean, it sounds completely surreal, doesn't it? Like something out of a weird dream.
It really does. But, what's fascinating here is that this wasn't some bizarre weather fluke or anything.
Right.
This was actually a very deliberate move. It was part of an $8 million U.S. government program.
$8 million.
To do what?
To try and control this invasive brown tree snake population.
Yeah.
I mean, the mission was really to get a handle on a problem that had basically taken over the island for decades.
Decades, wow. Okay, so this brown tree snake, let's talk about that. Where did it even come from?
Well, it's native to places like Australia, New Guinea, the Solomon Islands. Not Guam.
Not Guam. So how did it get there?
That's still debated a bit, but the main theory is that it's sort of hitched a ride, probably on military cargo ships after World War II.
Hitchhikers. Yeah, likely from Manus Island in Papua New Guinea, maybe snuck into the cargo holds or, hid in aircraft landing gear or something. We don't know for sure.
It really makes you think, though, how easily species can just jump continents now.
Oh, absolutely. It's a huge issue with global trade and travel. And on Guam, the situation just exploded.
Exploded how? Like, how many snakes are we talking about?
We're estimating around 2 million snakes.
2 million? On an island that's only, 50 kilometers long?
Exactly. It's relatively small.
Yeah.
That density, it's actually higher than the snake density in the Amazon rainforest.
That's staggering. Just hard to even picture.
Yeah. And these aren't small, harmless snakes either.
No.
No, they can grow up to 3 meters long.
3 meters. Okay. And what were they eating?
Well, initially, mostly lizards. But as they got bigger, their diet shifted. Rodents and, crucially, birds.
The birds?
Mm-hmm. Some studies showed they could eat birds that weighed up to 80% of their own body weight.
80%. Yeah, that's an incredibly effective predator.
Extremely. And that level of predation, it led to ecological catastrophe on Guam. Just devastating.
How devastating.
We're talking 10 out of the 12 native forest bird species gone. Extinct on the island in just a few decades.
10 out of 12. Just wiped out.
Wiped out. It just shows you how interconnected these ecosystems are, especially on islands. You remove one key piece.
And the whole thing can unravel.
Precisely. And the birds going missing, that set off this cascade effect.
Okay, like what?
Well, fewer birds eating spiders meant the spider population just went nuts.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, a 40-fold increase compared to nearby islands without the snake problem.
40 times the spiders. Can you even imagine? That's,
yeah,
nightmare fuel right there.
Definitely sounds like it. And the ecological hit didn't stop with the spiders.
What else?
Think about the trees. About 60 to 70% of Guam's trees relied on those native birds to disperse their seeds.
Ah, right. Birds eat fruit, fly somewhere else, poop out the seed.
Exactly. Basic forest regeneration. But with the birds gone,
No seed dispersal.
very little. Forest regeneration basically plummeted. An estimated 92% reduction.
92%. So the forest itself was starting to fail.
The very processes keeping it healthy were breaking down. It wasn't just about losing the birds, it was losing what the birds did.
Wow. Okay, so massive ecological damage. But did it affect people directly, besides the, extra spiders?
Oh, absolutely. These snakes, they have a habit of climbing, including power poles.
Oh, no. I can see where this is going.
Yep. Over about 20 years, they caused more than 2,000 power outages.
2,000 outages, just from snakes.
Just from snakes climbing on the equipment. It costs the island millions of dollars, repairs, lost productivity.
So it's an economic problem, too, not just environmental.
Definitely. It really highlights those hidden costs of invasive species. Environmental security and economic stability, they're often linked,
That makes sense. And I guess there's the worry they could spread elsewhere.
Huge worry. Especially places like Hawaii. If the brown tree snake got established there.
It could be Guam all over again. Yeah. Same ecological disaster, same economic costs.
Potentially, yes. It's a major biosecurity concern for the whole Pacific region.
So faced with this complete crisis, ecological, economic, what did they try before the mice? They didn't just jump to raining poison mice, surely.
No, definitely not. They tried more conventional things first. Traps. Lots of different trap designs.
Did those work?
Not well enough. They caught some snakes, but not nearly enough to make a dent in 2 million. They even tried trained dogs, snake-sniffing dogs.
Like detector dogs at the airport, but for snakes.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, just teams of people, human snake catchers, going out and trying to find them.
But it sounds like none of that really solved the core problem. The numbers were just too big.
Exactly. These methods were insufficient. The snakes are nocturnal, good at hiding in dense forests. It's incredibly hard work.
So they needed something different, something more radical.
Which brings us back to the sky. To this, well, ingenious, if maybe a bit grim, solution, the aerial mouse drop.
Okay, tell me more about these mouse parachutes. How did that actually work?
So they used dead mice, specifically neonatal mice, so quite small, and they attached them to these little parachutes made of cardboard and tissue paper.
Cardboard and tissue paper. Why that?
It was shaped like an inverted horseshoe, kind of. The idea was to slow the fall, but also, crucially, to get tangled up in the branches of trees.
Ah, so they wouldn't just fall straight to the ground.
Right. They wanted them caught in the canopy up where the snakes spend a lot of their time hunting.
Okay, makes sense. And the poison, you said it was acetaminophen, like Tylenol or paracetamol.
Exactly. Common over-the-counter pain reliever for humans. But for brown tree snakes, it's highly toxic.
How does it work on them?
It messes up the oxygen transport in their blood, basically prevents their red blood cells from carrying oxygen effectively.
And it doesn't take much?
Nope. A very small dose, about 80 milligrams in these mice, was enough to be lethal to a snake.
So these little mice packages floating down were essentially targeted poison delivery systems.
That was the idea. The snakes are arboreal, meaning they live and hunt in trees. So dropping bait directly into their habitat seemed like a potentially effective strategy.
But what about other animals? Guam must have other things besides snakes and spiders, right?
Yep.
Pigs, cats, dogs. Wouldn't they eat the mice?
That was a major concern, obviously. Safety for non-target species. So experts looked into it pretty carefully. Their assessment was that the risk was relatively low. For something like a pig or a cat to get a lethal dose, they'd need to eat a huge number of these tiny poisoned mice, way more than they were likely to find or consume.
So the dose was lethal for snakes, but likely sublethal for most other things that might find one or two.
That was the calculation, yes, making it relatively targeted towards the snakes.
Still, I imagine not everyone was thrilled with the idea of poisoning animals, even invasive snakes.
No, absolutely not. There was criticism, particularly from animal rights organizations.
What was their main objection?
That it was potentially a cruel way for the snakes to die, that they might suffer as the acetaminophen took effect. It raises ethical questions, for sure.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Trying to protect an entire ecosystem versus the method used against the invasive species.
It really is. And it's important to remember the goal here wasn't total eradication.
Really? Not wipe them out completely.
Given the numbers, the terrain, eradication is probably impossible, or at least astronomically expensive and difficult. The aim was control.
Just knock the population down to a level where the ecosystem could start to recover. And maybe less power outages.
Exactly. Manage the problem. And the efforts are ongoing. In 2020, the U.S. Department of the Interior put another, $3.4 million towards snake control.
Is the mouse drop still part of the plan?
It's not explicitly stated if they'll use that specific method again on a large scale, but the investment shows they're still actively fighting the problem.
So this whole story, the snakes arriving, the birds vanishing, the spiders booming, the power outages, and then raining mice.
It is quite a story. And the mouse drop itself, as strange as it sounds, it's actually a really striking example, isn't it?
Of what?
Of the sort of unconventional, sometimes kind of unsettling methods scientists have to come up with to try and protect ecosystems when they're under threat from invasive species.
It's like a real aha moment in conservation tactics, maybe. Thinking way outside the box.
Definitely outside the box.
Right.
It shows the lengths required when the natural balance gets so drastically thrown off.
Yeah. I mean, the story of the poisoned mice over Guam, it really does stick with you. It definitely drives home how serious invasive species are.
It does, a powerful reminder of these complex challenges all over the world. And it highlights the creativity, maybe even the weirdness sometimes, of the solutions people devise.
Absolutely.
So, while that image is pretty unforgettable, thousands of mice floating down on tiny parachutes.
Hard to forget, yeah.
It does make you think.
Right. What other surprising, maybe even stranger tactics are being used or considered out there?
Exactly. It kind of pushes you to consider our wider impact, on global biodiversity and the sheer ingenuity and sometimes the sheer strangeness needed to even try and address the problems we've caused.